Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the 33%. This is Talking Nerdy with Ruff, and I'm Ruff. Today we'll do a comic book review, and I was doing the Marvel crossovers going into, I think I got to House of M, and I was going to do Avengers versus X-Men, and I've got them all right here, but it'd be not absurdly long, but it'd be a longer video. So I decided that I hadn't really done any DC books. I've done the one Sandman review, which is technically Vertigo. It's in the DC universe now, but at the time it was Vertigo. So I'm going to do the Watchmen. This is not, I mean, it's a Watchmen book, obviously, but it's a Dave Gibbons book, and it's like behind the scenes sketches and stuff. It was just the only one that I had handy because at one time I had the Watchmen set, but it's one of the few comic sets that I sold, and I've never been able to get another set back. I've seen a few pretty good copies. It's just I hadn't had the means to get another good copy back. So what the Watchmen is it's a comic book series that come out in, I believe, 86. Let me check and make sure. Yeah, 86, which is the year I was born. And the Watchmen is largely touted as the first book of the modern age, and people point to different comics. Like DC has got the Crisis on Infinite Earths, bridging the gap between the Bronze Age and the modern age, and then there's a Uncanny X-Men storyline in Marvel. But actually I'm gonna make a video like my film rights video, who has what right to that Quest for Clarity video. Just giving you all a little background. The Watchmen was created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, and upon its inception, DC had gained a bunch of rights to charlatan comics characters, and Alan Moore was chomping at the bit to use them, but the way he knew the story he wanted to tell, but he knew the way it was going to work out, most of the characters wouldn't make it out of it. So they talked him into creating his own characters. So Watchmen's set in an alternate reality that closely mirrors the contemporary world of the 1980s. The primary difference is the presence of superheroes. The point of divergence occurs in the year 1938. Their existence in this version of the United States is shown to have dramatically affected and altered the outcome of real-world events such as the Vietnam War and the presidency of Richard Nixon. In keeping with the realism of the series, although the costume crime fighters of Watchmen are commonly called superheroes, only one, named Dr. Manhattan, possesses any superhuman powers. The war in Vietnam ends with a U.S. victory in '71. Nixon is still president as of October 1985 upon the Watergate scandal not coming to pass. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan occurs approximately 6 years later than it does in real life. When the story begins, the existence of Dr. Manhattan has given the U.S. a strategic advantage over the Soviet Union, which has dramatically increased Cold War tensions. Eventually, by 1977, superheroes grow unpopular among the police and the public, leading them to be outlawed with the passage of the Keene Act. While many of the heroes retired, only Dr. Manhattan, and the comedian operate as government-sanctioned agents. Another named Rorschach continues to operate outside the law. And these guys were like heroes. There's also a movie. There's a couple cartoon movies. I know it's one, the Black Freighter, something about the Black Freighter, and I believe there's another one. I believe it's two of them. And there is the movie, I think it's all, it's the movie, the miniseries. There's been, since in recent years, like Doomsday Clock. That's tied into the Watchmen somehow, but I haven't read it. So in October of 1985, New York City detectives are investigating the murder of Edward Blake. With police having no leads, costume vigilante Rorschach decides to probe further, discovering Blake to have been the true identity of the comedian. Costume hero employed by the U.S. government, Rorschach believes he has discovered a plot to terminate costume adventurers and sets about to warn 4 of his retired comrades. Dan Dryberg, formerly the Second Night Owl, the superpowered and emotionally detached John Osterman, codenamed Dr. Manhattan, and his lover, Lori Juspizic, I don't know how you say it, Silk Spectre, and Adrian Vett, once the hero Ozymandias, now a successful businessman. After Blake's funeral, Manhattan is accused on national television of being the cause of cancer in friends and former colleagues. When the government takes the accusation seriously, Manhattan exiles himself to Mars. As the U.S. depends on Manhattan as a strategic military asset, his departure throws humanity into political turmoil, with the Soviets invading Afghanistan to capitalize on the perceived American weakness. Rorschach's concerns appear vindicated when Veidt narrowly survives an assassination attempt, and Rorschach himself is framed and imprisoned for murdering a former supervillain named Moloch. Neglected in a relationship with the once human Manhattan, whose now godlike powers and transformation have removed him completely from the everyday concerns of living beings, no longer kept on retainer by the government. I'm just going to say Silk Spectre. It says her last name, but I can't pronounce it. Stays with Drybird. They begin a romance, don their costumes, and resume vigilante work as they grow close together. With Drybird starting to believe some aspects of Rorschach's conspiracy theory, the pair take it upon themselves to break him out of prison. After looking back on his own personal history, Manhattan places the fate of his involvement with human affairs in Spectre's hands. He teleports her to Mars to make the case for emotional investment. During the course of the argument, Silk Spectre is forced to come to terms with the fact that Blake, who once attempted to rape her mother, was in fact her biological father following a second consensual relationship. This discovery, reflecting the complexity of human emotions and relations, resparks Manhattan's interest in humanity. On Earth, Night Owl and Rorschach continue to uncover conspiracy and find evidence that Vett may be behind the plan. Rorschach writes his suspicions about Vett in his journal, in which he has been recording his entire investigation, and mails it to the New Frontiersman, a local right-wing newspaper. The pair then confront Vett at his Antarctic retreat. He explains his underlying plan is to save humanity from impending nuclear war by faking an alien invasion of New York, which will annihilate half the city's population. He hopes this will unite the superpowers against a perceived common enemy. He also reveals that he has murdered the comedian, arranged for Manhattan's past associates to contract cancer, staged the attempt on his own life in order to place himself above suspicion, and killed Moloch in order to frame Rorschach. This was all done in an attempt to prevent the plan from being exposed. Night Owl and Rorschach find Vett's logic callous and abhorrent, but Vett has already enacted his plan. When Manhattan and Spectre arrive back on Earth, they are confronted by mass destruction and death in New York, with a gigantic squid-like creature created by Vett's laboratories dead in the middle of the city. Manhattan notices his abilities are limited by tachyons emanating from the Antarctic, and the pair teleport to Earth. They discover Vett's involvement and confront him. Vett shows everyone news broadcast confirming that the emergence of a new threat has indeed prompted peaceful cooperation between the superpowers. This leads almost all present to agree that concealing the truth is in the best interest of world peace. Rorschach refuses to compromise and leaves, intent on revealing the truth. As he is making his way back, he is confronted by Manhattan. Rorschach declares that Manhattan will have to kill him to stop him from exposing Vett, which Manhattan duly does. Manhattan then wanders through the base and finds Vett, who asks him if he did the right thing then. Manhattan responds that nothing ever ends, before leaving the Earth to create life elsewhere. Dryberg and Spectre go into hiding under new identities and continue their romance. Back in New York, the editor of the New Frontiersman asks his assistant to find some filler material from the Crank File, a collection of rejected submissions to the paper, which many of have not been reviewed yet. The series ends with a young man reaching towards a pile of discarded submissions, near the top of which is Rorschach's journal. So it's a really, I don't know, to me, it's a different comic, but it's different in ways. Like, you don't know these characters. It's not a band of Avengers or a group of Justice League or Justice League Dark. These are characters you didn't know at the time, or going into it I didn't know, nothing about. And it's just fleshing out them characters, and I really enjoyed it. It's a good mini-series. Watchmen actually caused a huge rift between Alan Moore and DC because of the rights on it. The way one of the hallmarks of the modern age of comics is the rise in creator-owned properties like Spawn and Sandman. You know, like I said, Sandman's a DC title and Spawn is an Image title, but they're owned by Todd McFarlane and Gaiman. They get part of the royalties, whereas before it wasn't like that. And Watchmen was created by Gibbons and Alan Moore, and they drew up a contract that they all agreed on because it was drew up based on how comic book distribution had worked up to that point. And what they done was there was a new thing, and I've got, that's not right here, it's in another box. Trade paperbacks become a new thing. I'm not talking about graphic novel, I'm talking about trade paperback and grubbing graphic novels as well, but they had really started to take off. And part of the contract, that one of the big deals in Alan and Dave's contract was when the Watchmen went out of print for a year, that DC hadn't used them in any way for a year, the rights would revert back to them to do with as they wanted to. You know, if they wanted to sell them to Marvel, if they wanted to make their own comic and fund it, whatever they wanted to do, it's their character. Up till that point, they get a share of the profit, a pretty substantial share. I think it's like 15 or 20%, but it's their property. You know, it could be a lot better. Well, DC decides, well, I think it's 12 issues, best I remember, 11 or 12. They're like, you know what? Let's just compress them. I'm talking about as soon as they're done with it, like a few months after the original miniseries come out, they made a trade paperback, and they've printed them every year since. They have not quit printing a trade paperback, and that's how they kind of screwed Alan Moore over, and it led to him quitting DC Comics. He don't want nothing to do with them, and I don't particularly blame him. You know, it kind of makes sense because it was so, you know, in good faith. This is how it had always worked. Like DC got the upper hand, but it's a big corporation, and as big as Alan Moore is, he's still the small guy in that situation, and he kind of got beat out of it. And when they done like the 20th anniversary, I think, or 25th anniversary, they tried to get Alan Moore on board to do stuff. Like there was talks they was going to do a series of DC figures for the Watchmen and all this, and he's like, I don't want nothing to do with it. And they canceled the figures and stuff. It's a point of contention. It's one of the bigger points of contention in comic book history, as big as Gaiman McFarlane fight about who owned Angela and Dark Spawn, or Medieval Spawn, and Angela Medieval Spawn, and the other two Angels. I can't think of them right now, but it was a big deal. And when I was reading about this, about the behind the scenes, I found out like Alan Moore would call Gaiman and get like quotes and stuff put in the book with tidbits when he couldn't come up with nothing. I thought that was really cool. But anyways, that's the Watchmen. I would say it's on the must-read list. I enjoy all the comic books that I reviewed, like Avengers Disassembled and House of M, Sandman, Avengers vs. X-Men, but I feel like Watchmen and Sandman are like integral. If you're a comic book fan, you need to read them. And I'm going to do a couple more DC titles later that I've got on my list. If y'all have any that y'all like for me to review, if I've already read them or I have access to them, I'll gladly review them. I prefer not to just like I look up the plot and stuff online and read it off there, but I do that with books I've already read. So I hope y'all enjoy this. As always, you know, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Hope everyone has a good night, and see y'all soon.